Right here in Australia, you are watching it happen in real time. BYD just hit 100,000 sales in under 3.5 years, finishing third in Australia's monthly sales chart behind only Toyota and Kia. For about 100 years, the global car industry was dominated by three countries: Germany, Japan, and the United States. Out of them came the names that defined modern driving: Toyota, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Ford, Honda, and BMW. But in the space of 3 years, it has been a bloodbath. Mercedes watched its profits collapse by 28%. Porsche lost 92% of its bottom line in a single year. Stellantis posted a $26 billion loss, the worst in its history. Volkswagen announced 50,000 job cuts. Behind every single one of these blows, the same name keeps coming back: BYD. A company that, until 2003, was still producing nothing but simple batteries. Back then, the very idea that they could compete with Tesla was so absurd that Elon Musk could not hold back a laugh when asked about them on live television. Today, Musk is not laughing anymore. How did a small battery workshop bring the entire car industry to its knees in less than a decade? And why is nobody talking about what is really happening behind the curtain? BYD and the other Chinese car makers are not just dominating Beijing and Shanghai. They are planting their flag on every continent, and nobody seems able to stop them. In Thailand, BYD took 40% of the electric vehicle market in 18 months. A region that had been a Japanese stronghold for 40 years flipped in a few years. In Singapore, 1 in 5 new cars sold last year was a BD. In Europe, Chinese brands now account for more than 11% of electric vehicle sales, and the share keeps growing. Renault just posted its first net loss in 5 years. Friedrich Merz had to fly to Beijing with 30 chief executive officers, not to sign contracts, but to ask Xi Jinping to stop suffocating German industry. And then there's Australia. BYD entered the mass market here in late 2022. By November 2025, it had recorded 45,672 sales, a 147% year-on-year increase. The Shark 6 plug-in hybrid ute, a direct challenge to the Hilux and Ranger, became its best-selling model. 82.8% of BYD's Australian sales went to private buyers, the highest ratio of any top 10 brand in the country. These are not fleet purchases padding the numbers. Australians are choosing BD. The United States is the only major market where BYD is still blocked, officially for national security reasons. And even there, the Americans know it is a holding pattern, not a victory. So the real question is, how? His name is Wang Chuanfu. In 1995, he was a 29-year-old engineer who borrowed $40,000 from his cousin. Within 7 years, he was supplying Motorola and Nokia. By 2003, BYD was the biggest battery maker in the world. That same year, Wang bought a bankrupt state-owned car factory in the middle of nowhere. His own investors tried to stop him. The Chinese business press called it a joke. Wang did not even have a driving license, but his logic was simple. The future of the car was not the engine, it was the battery, and nobody knew more about batteries than him. Wang made 3 decisions that would quietly change everything. The first was to refuse to depend on anyone. Tesla buys its batteries from Panasonic. Volkswagen relies on hundreds of outside suppliers for chips, motors, electronics, even the glass. BYD built everything in-house: batteries, semiconductors, motors, software, down to the windshields. When the global chip shortage paralyzed the auto industry in 2021, BYD turned up the dial on its own chip factories and kept delivering. Every crisis that hurt competitors made them stronger. The second was a bet on the boring option. While Tesla evangelized pure electric vehicles, Wang poured resources into plug-in hybrids, cars that run on electricity for daily commutes and switch to gasoline for longer trips. By the time BYD was selling more plug-in hybrid vehicles than Tesla was selling electric vehicles in total, the Western press was still debating whether hybrids were even real technology. That gave BYD access to 500 million Chinese consumers that Tesla could never touch. It is also why the Shark 6 is the fastest selling BYD in Australia. Drive the Bruce Highway north of Brisbane, or anywhere between Perth and Adelaide, and the charging network thins out fast. Outside Sydney and Melbourne, a car that doesn't depend on it entirely just makes more practical sense, and BYD was the one that showed up with exactly that car. The third was the Blade battery. Released in 2020, it used lithium iron phosphate instead of the nickel and cobalt mix everyone else was using. The result was cheaper, safer, and longer lasting. It meant BYD could undercut Tesla on price while claiming a genuine safety advantage. 4 years later, Tesla started buying batteries from BYD for its own cars. The company Musk laughed at was now supplying the batteries inside Teslas. And Australia is proving the blueprint works globally. In May 2026, Toyota, which has dominated Australian roads for decades, was down 30.7% year on year. BYD hit second place nationally that same month, breaking its own volume record. China has now overtaken Japan as the biggest source of new vehicles sold in Australia. That is not a trend. That is a structural shift. But BA didn't just build better cars, they built a system on a playing field that was never level. Between 2015 and 2020, BA received roughly $4.3 billion in direct subsidies from the Chinese state. In 2016, those subsidies exceeded the company's entire net profit. Free land, zero interest loans, tax breaks, guaranteed public contracts, and direct buyer subsidies. At its peak, analysts estimate BYD was pocketing between $2,000 and $4,000 of public money per vehicle. Think about what that means for Volkswagen or Toyota. BYD can sell below cost for years and still post a profit because the state tops up the difference. This is why Mercedes cannot just build better cars. BYD is not a company competing in a market. It is an instrument of national industrial strategy. By the time Western governments started talking about tariffs, Beijing was already winding down the subsidies because the job was done. But the cracks are starting to show. An independent Hong Kong research firm called GMT Research published a report claiming BYD's real debt is not the 42 billion yuan officially reported. It's closer to 323 billion yuan, almost 8 times higher. The gap is hidden in supply chain financing, where BD pays its suppliers on average 275 days after delivery, in an industry where the norm is 50 to 60 days. Some analysts are now comparing the scale of it to what Evergrande was doing in real estate before it collapsed. There are questions about the sales numbers too. Reports from Chinese dealerships describe new cars being registered to shell companies at month end, then resold as 0-kilometer used vehicles to hit targets. When BD reports 4.25 million vehicles sold last year, it's a fair question to ask how many found a real buyer. Quality problems have piled up. There was a 97,000 vehicle recall in September 2024 over a steering defect. Another recall involved 115,000 vehicles in October 2025. Net profit for 2025 dropped 19%. In February 2026, sales fell 41% year on year. Geely is eating into BYD's domestic share, and the Chinese government itself warned that the ongoing price war is not sustainable. When Beijing tells its own champions to slow down, something is off. None of this means BYD is about to collapse. But the gap between the official story and the financial reality is widening. That shift has a name in Australia. It is the Shark 6 parked next to a Hilux on a work site in Queensland. It is Mazda, down 27% in a single month. It is Toyota, the brand that has sat at number 1 in this market longer than most buyers can remember, losing ground quarter after quarter to a company that did not make a single car until 2003. Whether BYD's financial cracks widen into a collapse or quietly get papered over, the displacement of the old order is already permanent. The question for Australian car buyers is not whether Chinese brands are here to stay. It is which of the brands they grew up with will not be.